I know this is early on a Friday morning, but I had this on my mind and wanted to share it quick. It's probably be a short hangout. You can see by the title, sometimes I like to use what's called in English alliteration. And there's some verses I'm going to share about what is wise and what is foolish, and about people who straddle the fence between salvation and not, especially, and how frustrating it can be when it seems like no matter how good of an argument you make, no matter how much time you spend presenting it, it usually doesn't do any good whatsoever. So it isn't about the arguments. It isn't about the presentation. There's something else going on. So let me start with what I got showing here on the screen. Remembering that this is, first of all, about what between wisdom and foolishness. And this is 1 Corinthians chapter 1, starting with verse 17. And we're going to go through the end of the chapter, which is not real long. And, whoops, let me go back there. Okay, for the end, this is my translation, of course, so some of the terminology may be a little different, though it's, I think, more true to the Greek. And if they have a Hebrew names Bible, then why can't we have a Greek names Bible? So 1 Corinthians 1:17, for the anointed did not commission me to immerse, but to bring the gospel, and not with sophisticated words which would drain the power from the cross of the anointed. In fact, what we say about the cross sounds ridiculous to those who are on the road to destruction, but it is the power of God to us who are being saved. For it is written, I will annihilate the wisdom of the wise, and I will confound the understanding of the educated. Where is the wise one? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? God has made a mockery of the world's wisdom. So I guess I'll just go on and read the whole passage first, but pay attention to what God says about the world's wisdom. Going on, verse 21, the fact is that in his wisdom, God decided to save those who would believe by means of this ridiculous proclamation, not by the wisdom of the world. The Judeans demand miraculous signs, and the Greeks rely on wisdom. But we proclaim the crucified anointed, a trap for the Judeans and a nonsense to the non-Judeans. And to those who are appointed, both Judeans and Greeks, the anointed is the power and wisdom of God. His foolishness is wiser than people's wisdom, and his weakness is stronger than people's strength. Brothers and sisters, consider the circumstances of your appointment. Not many of you were considered wise. Not many had power. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish to shame the wise. He chose the weak of the world to disgrace the strong. He chose the lowly, the outcast, and that which does not exist to neutralize what does exist, so that nobody could brag before God. Yet you belong to him and are united with anointed Jesus, who became wisdom from God to us, as well as justice and holiness and freedom. So as it is written, let the one who brags brag about the master. So I think it's pretty obvious in that passage that wisdom is a good thing. It's like I said in my previous, where two or three gathered, number 9. I was going to wait till then to do this, but I decided, I said last time I was going to look at that map site. And so I decided to go ahead and do this now. And what we can see there is that wisdom and knowledge are good things, but they have to be from a good source. And the world does not produce such things most of the time. I mean, there are things that they can figure out. There are a lot of things that wise things that unbelievers have said, but ultimate wisdom and ultimate knowledge comes from God. And God deliberately, whenever he has intervened in history throughout the Old Testament, you can see, at least it serves that purpose, that God goes out of the norm and he chooses the youngest, the weakest, the smallest. That's the habit of God when he intervenes in history. And it's no less true in the New Testament, where he chose something that does not rely on deep philosophy or much study. Now, you can do that with the Bible because we're so far removed from the text, but the message itself of salvation is something that sounds foolish to the philosophers and something that they reject out of hand because it isn't complicated enough and doesn't take enough study. But this is what God thinks of the world's wisdom. Now let me go to chapter 3 and verses 18 through 20. And it says, "Don't be deluded. If anyone among you presumes to be wise in this age, let them become foolish in order to become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness before God. As it is written, he captures the wise in their craftiness. And again, the master knows that the thinking of the wise is pointless." So when people, as they are in the habit of doing, especially now online, get into the habit of trashing the Bible because it isn't sophisticated enough, and they think that their philosophy is the measure by which they judge everything else, these people are deluded, the Bible says. And the reason they're deluded is because they, using an old expression, miss the forest for the trees. It's like trying to figure out what a personality anyone has by dissecting them under a lab, a microscope. That's, may take a lot of expertise, but it's totally off the mark. It's totally pointless. And this is what God is saying in these passages, that worldly wisdom can only take you so far. It won't take you to God. And that, I guess, really all I have to say about that is pretty obvious what God thinks about putting philosophy, human philosophy over revealed truth. And this is, again, not talking about it's bad to do empirical science or anything like that. It's good to do research and study. I've gone over that before, and when Paul wrote to Timothy, and he said, "Study to show yourself approved, a worthy worker who is rightly dividing or discerning the word of truth." So it does take study, but when it comes to the simple message of the gospel, philosophy will never get you there. And it does not trump revealed truth. You can philosophize all you like about things. It's like what the philosophers themselves bring up, the allegory of the cave. We're all in the cave, and you can speculate all you like about the shadows on the wall and what they mean, but until you get out, you won't know exactly what's going on in the outside, outside of this realm. And so philosophy will never get you there, because the shadows are never going to tell the whole story. And so what God did is dip down into history and come into the cave and say, "Trust me, I'll demonstrate my worthiness to be listened to by dying for you and rising again and doing all these miracles. And if that doesn't cut it for you, well, I guess nothing will." And then he left back out of the cave, and now it's up to us to decide whether to trust this person or not, to trust God or not. And so I don't think we have anything to lose by taking that approach. I mean, everybody's guessing anyway, and people think their philosophies are proofs. And this has been what a lot of us in the conspiracy world have had as a criticism of NASA and mainstream scientism, is that they have abandoned the scientific method and replaced it with philosophy. And it all sounds very airtight to them because, as one of my favorite Bible verses says, Proverbs 18:17 says, "The first to speak until they're seems right until they're cross-examined." And what people do is in scientism, they get a philosophical interpretation of something and decide that this is the truth. Because it works for them, it's a closed system, a circular argument, and they never step out of that box to even ask the question, are there other stories that would work equally well? Are there other ways to interpret the world? And we've had this for many decades, and the creation-evolution debate, is the earth old or young? Young being a relative term, but I think thousands of years is still pretty old. But as long as people have been debating that, they've been all having the same observations, the same material to look at in the present. It's the philosophical interpretation that differs, and each side is absolutely convinced that their story, their interpretation is the right one. And so having an airtight argument still doesn't mean you've found the truth. And this is kind of an extension of what I was talking about in the last hangout, the where two or three are gathered, number 9. So at any rate, the point being right now that you won't get out of Plato's allegory of the cave by speculation. You have to get out or trust someone who did. And there's only one who really did, who can talk to us. And the Bible is the written communication. And I've said before, just because God's words are written down doesn't mean they're not God's words anymore. Which kind of brings me to the next two things, the Fence-Straddlers and frustration. Let me do the Fence-Straddlers first, about being double-minded. In both Testaments, we have verses to the effect that God does not like people sitting on fences and wavering between two opinions. It says, 1 Kings 18:21, Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. And this is an interesting little thing about the names of God, which is part of the frustration issue. No matter how many times I explain this, it doesn't get across. If you look at a Hebrew interlinear on that verse, it says, if Yahweh is Elohim, then. So here we have, once again, supporting my claim that I've made before, that Elohim is a generic word for God. I mentioned before the incident of Moses at the burning bush, and pointed out the fact that when Moses didn't know God's real personal name, he said, Elohim, who are you? So Elohim is like our English word God, in that you have to define which God you mean. And in the burning bush passage, if I've mentioned before, God identified himself further by saying, I am the Elohim, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when we look at this verse in 1 Kings 18:21, we're seeing in Joshua's time, I think it was, that, sorry, Elijah's time, that Elohim was a generic word. Otherwise, he would not say, if Yahweh is Elohim. So, and he contrasted Yahweh with Baal. Now, I've heard so many ignorant people try to equate the two. You know, that Baal means Lord, therefore Lord in the Old Testament, New Testament means Baal. No, that's not how it works. You can see right here, Yahweh and Elohim. Yahweh is a more personal word. Elohim is the generic word. Baal is a personal word. And so Yahweh and Baal are contestants for the title of Elohim. So I don't know how people can ignore this about the Bible, what it says in itself. They just dismiss it out of hand and go with their philosophy and their studies of the same history that they claim the Jesuits have monkeyed with, that apparently only the Jesuits only monkeyed with the Bible and nothing else. And that is a fallacy called special pleading. But they make this all the time. Even very studied people make the same error when it comes to the Bible, because the Bible seems, for one curious reason or another, to hold a special place of derision in the minds of the philosophers of this age. And so we see in here in this passage, 1 Kings 8:21, if Yahweh is Elohim. So Yahweh is a more personal name. And as I said before about Moses and the burning bush, God not only identifies himself as Yahweh, he says he is the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now then, that word Yahweh, as I pointed out many times before, to no avail. Yahweh is an acronym that means I am that I am. It has nothing to do with Job or Jupiter. And that's the frustration part. So I don't know why people keep repeating this. People who are well studied keep repeating this error that somehow Job and Jupiter have anything to do with Jehovah, which is the Latinization of Yahweh, which is an acronym meaning I am who I am. So all those philosophical arguments about the etymology or historical tracing of the meaning of the word allegedly from Yahweh to Jupiter is totally not only pointless, but in error. It's inaccurate. And people who keep spreading this after they've been told these things are spreading disinfo. I get so tired of hearing that. And that's what, hence the title. It's because people, it doesn't matter how many times you may present this evidence and how many ways you present it, and I don't know how else to get across the fact that the Bible in many places, I've mentioned at least two, the burning bush and this one in 1 Kings 18:21, that Yahweh is simply God saying, I am self-existing, and Elohim is a generic word for God, and that God himself identifies himself as the God, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is, I could branch off into another thing about the fact that I just lost my train of thought. Somebody help me out there in chat. I was going somewhere with that. Abrahamic religions. Such another disinfo phrase. Abraham was not a Muslim. Abraham was not really even a Jew, because neither of those things existed in the time of Abraham. Judaism didn't exist till Moses, and Islam did not exist till 600 something AD, like 620 AD. So between Abraham and Muhammad is about 1,000-year gap or so. Now, the only reason they claim it to be an Abrahamic religion is, here again, there's where the twist is, the equivocation philosophically, if you want to go that way, because they can trace a genetic line. The Arabs can trace a genetic line from Abraham, because the Bible shows through the Table of Nations that it was on the unpromised, unblessed side of Abraham was Ishmael, who was Abraham's son, and Ishmael's son went off into one line, and then even the line from the child of promise, which is Isaac, he had Jacob and Esau, and Esau went bad and was more of the Arabic peoples, and neither Isaac nor Esau, neither Ishmael nor Esau were Muslims. Neither were they Jews. So how can anyone say the people that came from the Arabic areas were having an Abrahamic religion? You can say they had an Abrahamic genetic line, but you can't say they had Abrahamic religion. So when every time somebody says the Abrahamic religions, there's really only two at most: Judaism and Christianity. And they both have the same Old Testament God, if you discount the vile Talmudists or Masoretes. And like I've said before about language and Bible translations, the Masoretes are a fancy word for the Talmudists. The Talmud is a vile document from vile people. And so discounting them and going with the Torah observant people, Israelites, then those are the true Jews. If you want to know who fake and real Jews are, the real ones are the Torah observant, the fake ones are the Talmudists. So when it comes to Abrahamic religions, Islam is not one. They are an Abrahamic genetic descent if they're Arabs, but there are Muslims who are not Arabs. They cannot claim Abraham whatsoever. There is no religious connection between Abraham and Islam. None whatsoever. So there's no such thing as Abrahamic religions, including Islam. Islam is not an Abrahamic anything but genetic. So when people say these things, try to remember this stuff. I hope one or two people ever remember the argument I'm presenting here and present it to people who continue knowingly to spread disinfo about who Abraham is and about what God considers foolish with worldly philosophy. And as far as fence-straddlers go, let me go on to the next verse here that I collected, James 1:5-8. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. So ask for wisdom from God, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. I know so many people who can't choose. They can't choose an earth model. They can't choose an earth age. They can't choose whether Jesus rose from the dead and they want to believe that. They can't choose between the Bible and other writings, or they choose against it. That seems to be an easier choice. But there are so many people riding the fence, you cannot do that and expect to be accepted by God. Another verse, Revelation 3:16, and he's talking to a church here, Jesus is. So he says, so because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. Jesus hates indecision. And that's all the verses I am collecting for that. But so make up your mind. Make it up not on the basis of strictly worldly wisdom, but on a fact of history that Jesus rose from the dead, which is as established a fact as any other. And it's so hypocritical of people to say, well, the Bible was written by Jesuits, but this 6,000-year-old Hindu document, no, that wasn't written by anybody with an agenda. No, of course not. The hypocrisy is stunning. So this is what I wanted to do this hangout about today, was mainly that people are looking everywhere but God for wisdom. They can't make up their minds. And it's so frustrating to explain these simple things, especially about the name of God, over and over to people educated and uneducated, and nobody gets it. And they go on like I've never said a word, and I'm so tired of wasting my time trying to explain it. So here it is in a little hangout, and hopefully, like I said, this will be short, so people don't have to look through a 2-hour, 3-hour hangout to find out what I think about worldly wisdom and philosophy, and people unable to decide, and people spreading disinfo about the Bible and Christianity. I just can't deal with those people anymore. Take a quick look at the chat. Let me stop screen sharing. This is, once again, with Google, YouTube. When I first started up the Hangout, as soon as I went to screen share, the whole browser crashed, even though this time I screen shared from a different browser. I thought at first it was confusing to this one browser that I was, screen sharing a window in it. So I used a different browser and it still crashed. So I don't know what to do with Google YouTube these days. I can barely run Hangouts. So anyway, what's another frustration is I've got as many people watching now early on a Friday morning as I do on my regular weekly Tuesday night Hangout that nobody can seem to remember I do. So, but I'll probably keep doing it for a little while anyway on Tuesday. And like I said, I want to go more over that map site. I haven't even looked at it since Tuesday, but I need to do that. It's been kind of busy. Hello to all the kind souls in the chat who'd bothered to show up. The new S&M model, you might want to consider not abbreviating that. Square something, sun and moon, that's what that means. Yeah, spell that out next time. Yeah, I had been watching that channel too, and I still have things that don't add up for me. And I haven't spent a lot of time listening to what they mean by their dimensions, so I don't know. Anyway, sorry about that, child. You lost sleep, and yeah, it is difficult to keep doing the where 2 or 3 gathered series when nobody comes. And I don't mean that to insult the few who come. I'm just saying on any given day or night, no matter what time, you will find hundreds of people at drama sites. I think I can generically refer to all of them as drama sites because that's what they're about. It's all about gossip and drama. And people like causes. They like thrill rides. That's where the crowds go. They go to the amusement park. They don't go to the library. I guess I'm the library. But anyway, so I just did this one time today because of things that happened recently and just needed to get that out and didn't want to wait till next Tuesday. And like I said, I had in the number 9 for the few people who were there, I said I would go over this map site that I found that was very helpful, good resource. So I will try to look through that site before Tuesday and have something prepared for then. And after that'll be where two or three gather, number 10. I don't know if I'll keep going. Like I said, it's hard. It's like when I was a trumpet player for 30 years, and you spend 80-90% of your time practicing because you have to keep up the muscles in your embouchure, where you're the way you set your mouth to play the instrument. And if you're not in a band, you're between bands, it is hard to motivate yourself to practice because it's for no point. Nobody's going to hear you play. And so I've done a lot of work on Bible things, and it's there for anybody's to reference, but that's all it pretty much is. It's a reference, but it is very frustrating to hear people day after day, especially in the conspiracy communities, repeating this nonsense about the Bible and Christianity and the name of God and Abrahamic religions. So if you find anybody saying that, give them a link to this Hangout, because I'm not going to talk to them anymore about it. I talk till I'm blue in the face, and it does zero good at all. They go on like I said nothing. So here it is, having been said about what God considers foolish with worldly philosophy, that God detests fence-sitters, and that it's frustrating when people keep spreading disinfo about Bible and Christianity. So many people are even putting up mocking Hangout titles about Sunday services and gospel and all this, and 99% of the time they don't indicate any understanding of what that means. So anyway, I'm probably going to shut down because that's all I had to say. And I thank you few for coming, and pass it around if you can, because I'll probably be pretty scarce. Like I said, I'm not even sure if I'll continue the where two or three are gathered beyond this coming Tuesday. And just do a Hangout when I feel like doing a Hangout, because like I said, I don't get any less people on a spur of the moment Hangout than I do on a regularly planned one that nobody remembers when it is. So anyway, see you guys. Thanks for coming. And this should be up pretty soon since it's short. And I had to turn the DVD back on because otherwise, if you don't, it takes hours for it to appear. And like I said, just use this as a reference, give it as a link to people who are once again saying that Jupiter and Jove are Jehovah and spreading other ignorance like that. So there you go. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you all someplace else, maybe